Hello everybody, my name is Flame. Happy New Year everybody, and welcome back to another video on this channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you the best Fortnite settings and the best Windows settings along with the newest Nvidia driver and how it can all factor into getting better performance, better FPS, and less FPS dips and drops in Fortnite. So without further ado, like and subscribe to this video first. Did you really think I was going to start the video before I said that? But for real, I will actually start the video, but I do appreciate you liking and subscribing to my channel. It actually helps boost me in the algorithm, and it really does help me. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So last time I touched on the older Nvidia driver, and I recommended using 472.12, which is the legacy driver. But recently, someone at Nvidia finally answered our prayers and actually started listening to us. I don't know who at Nvidia did this, and if anyone at Nvidia will see this video who developed the driver, but hats off to you. You just made it so that us hardcore gamers finally switched over from the oldest driver ever, Force 57.30. That was the almost 2-year-old driver. That was the best Nvidia driver. But now we have a new crowned king, and that's 497.29. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a clean install of it, and I'm also going to show you the best Fortnite settings that also go along with this video. So to start off, find a web browser of your choice, and go to Google or your preferred search engine. Look up Advanced Drivers Nvidia. Once you've done that, you should see Advanced Driver Search. Click on this. So by default, it should automatically find your graphics card, but if it doesn't, make sure you go underneath here. If you have an RTX 3060, then I'd go underneath here and select RTX series, and then find your, or GeForce series, and find your RTX 30 or RTX 20 series GPU in here. Just look around and find your GPU. For example, mine is the GTX 1660. Change this from standard to GCH because you want the latest recommended driver. And go here, find 497.29, click here, and download the driver. And if your internet is as slow as mine, you can do some of these things while you're waiting. So while you're waiting for the driver to download, we can do a system prep real quick. So while you're down here, go down to your little search tab or search bar and just type %temp%. Now, because you have your web browser open, obviously you're going to have some stuff that won't be able to be deleted, but generally you can just go ahead and click Control A on your keyboard, Control plus A, and then hit the delete key. And then you can go ahead and hit this and then hit skip for the items that are currently in use, and then just close out of this. And the next thing you can do is open up a new File Explorer window, right click on your drive, your C drive, or whatever game drive that you have, or my C drive here, hit disk cleanup, and then just hit clean up files, clean up system files. Now, what this does is this is a bunch of stuff that Windows has stored, like thumbnail cache, DirectX shader cache, a bunch of stuff like that. And it's just going to go ahead and it's going to clear all these files for you. So I'm just going to go here and hit delete files and let it do its thing. While the driver is downloading, this is something that is very much so that I recommend doing if you are waiting for the driver to download. The next thing we can do while the driver is downloading is go to your Epic library, and I'll show you exactly what you need to do in here for optimization. So once you've loaded into your Epic games here, go to settings, make sure that you have all these settings unchecked here that I'm showing right now. Enable offline mode while browsing, minimize the system tray, make sure that this is enabled, run when my computer starts, make sure this is disabled, enable debug logging, make sure that's off, make sure allow installs while editors are running, that should be on, disable cloud saves because otherwise it'll get rid of the config that I'm going to show you later. Make sure that you have news and special offers off. I only like the free game notifications usually. And essentially, make sure that you have auto updates off as well. I see that auto updates being on is kind of pointless if you don't have the app launch up immediately with you. Now, the next step we can do inside of the Epic Launcher while you're waiting for your download, if you still are, is to right-click or click on the little 3 dots on Fortnite and go to Options and uncheck Fortnite Save the World and uncheck High-Res Textures. You want both of these to be unchecked It'll ask you to re-verify your game. Just wait till it re-verifies the game. And now you'll be playing Fortnite with low-res textures. This gives an immense FPS boost to lower-end hardware. If you are on high-end hardware, you can keep this checkmarked if you really want to or so choose so. But for general, like highest FPS, just have that disabled. So it has appeared that my driver has downloaded. So now I will show you exactly what to do with that driver. So once your driver is downloaded and right here is inside your downloads, you're going to drag it over to your desktop and then download an application called NV Clean Install. NV Clean Install is an application that allows you to debloat Nvidia drivers. And you want to right click on this once you've extracted it from my folder. Then go ahead and click yes. Everything will be in order, guys, inside of folders that I'm doing right now so that you can do it yourself. Now, this is going to show up here and you just want to wait for it to load a little bit. But if you don't want to wait for it to load, since we already downloaded the driver, you can go ahead and say use driver from disk, hit browse, and then go to where you have it on the desktop here. And then just click 497.29 and then click next. So now it's going to give you a bunch of options here. If you downloaded the one for your laptop GPU, I 100% cannot stress this enough, guys. If you are on a laptop, please keep Optimus enabled. If you do not keep Optimus enabled, you will not be able to use these swappable graphics on your laptop, and you will notice your battery life will be severely degraded if you are using a laptop that is a gaming laptop. I did this by accident and I went from an average of around 4 or 5 hours of battery life on my gaming laptop down to 1 to 2 hours from getting rid of this. It generally just is not a good idea for laptops. And then I'd also recommend if you do still play really old legacy Steam games to keep PhysX enabled, like Quake or Doom or some of those really older titles. Keep PhysX enabled because some games, believe it or not, that are really old, if you still play some of those retro games on Steam, need PhysX. So just go ahead and keep that enabled. Again, I'm on a desktop. All I want is the display driver, and I mentioned about PhysX already. I do not care about audio through my headphones. It was only going through my headphones. It is not going through my monitors, so I don't need HDMI audio. All I need is the display driver. So then we can click next here, and it's going to unpack the installer, and I'll show you what that looks like after it's done unpacking. So once your driver is done unpacking, you'll be greeted with the screen right here. And now to check and uncheck the following settings. So we want to checkmark disable installer telemetry and advertising, unattached express installation, install Nvidia control panel from the Windows Store. That is another thing I have to mention here. If you uninstalled the Microsoft Store from your PC, this right here, the Microsoft Store, and also went to your services and disabled a service called Microsoft Store Install Service, if this is not running, you will not be able to use Nvidia Control Panel after you do a clean installation with display driver on installer. So we're going to go down now and we're going to go ahead and checkmark show expert tweaks, disable driver telemetry, and we're going to disable HD audio sleep timer, even though we don't have HD audio. We're going to go here and we're going to enable message signal interrupts, and we're going to set this to high. So what this does, it is essentially the same thing that MSI mode used to do on your GPU. So if you see MSI mode here, if you remember from my previous latency videos or my older videos, checkmarking MSI and setting it to high is the previous way that you used to do it, but I just recently found out that you can hard code that into the driver and you can set MSI mode to be on by default in the driver when it's being installed. Disable HD CP. Now, this doesn't do anything because this is a legacy Nvidia option. I've heard from some people that disabling this does decrease latency a little bit, so you can play around with this. If it doesn't work out really well, then you can go ahead and remake the driver and then just do it again. Now, since we're going to be uncheckmarking a lot of this stuff here, guys, I would highly recommend checkmarking use anti-cheat compatibility. Basically what this does is it will pop up with a warning that says driver is unsigned. You just have to click install when you do it, because otherwise it will not let you use anti-cheat applications, because sometimes having modified drivers isn't a good thing, and anti-cheats are coded with bad things that say, oh, if there's even one little tiny modification to this driver, I will stop you and I will ban you from a game. So once you finish creating your driver, you should see this right here. And all I want you to do, guys, is to just right click on your desktop, create a new folder, name it new folder. I already made a folder called debloated driver, and I'm just going to delete everything in here just for show because I've already done this. So once you've made that folder on your desktop, you can click show in folder here, and then go ahead and just press Control A on your keyboard inside of the folder, hit Control C, and or just drag it into the folder to get rid of everything in here. Then once you've done that, all you have to do is just close out of this, close out of that. Now go into here and you will have your debloated driver just like that for you. You don't have to change any settings. Everything's just there. When you click setup, it'll do the setup and it'll already be debloated for you. You should not need to do anything. So once you have created your debloated driver, you're wanting to go ahead and boot into safe mode. So I want you to look up how to do that online because I actually don't have a way to show you right now. I don't currently have a capture card, but I can show you what to checkmark in this application once you've downloaded it. So again, a big, huge disclaimer here. In order to use Display Driver Uninstaller, you must be in safe mode on your computer. So once you're in safe mode, obviously I'm not in safe mode because I'm recording this video. I'm going to launch it and I'm going to show you exactly what settings to checkmark inside of Display Driver Uninstaller. So obviously it's going to tell me that I'm not in safe mode and it's going to yell at me, but the settings that you want to checkmark here are everything inside of the Nvidia settings here and basically just everything inside of the Nvidia settings. Then you're going to go down here and you're going to make sure that DCH driver, remove the Intel control panel from installed from the Microsoft Store. I usually do that anyway because it removes the Nvidia one too. And now prevent downloads from automatically installing through Windows Update. You want this checkmarked 100% because otherwise it will install the old driver that is installed with Windows 10 and you will have a very bad experience with that. So once you've checkmarked this option in safe mode, just go to here, select your GPU, and then click clean and restart. So what this will do is it will take you out of safe mode and it will boot you directly back into your operating system. Now, at first, you may be very confused because your desktop is going to be very blown up or it will just look normal like mine. Then all you need to do if it is blown up is to just go to your desktop folder here and find your debloated driver. So we're just going to look for our folder here, debloated driver, and then just click the setup exe right there and then go through the setup installation. Now, once the NVIDIA control panel has installed, you're going to click NVIDIA control panel and go to your NVIDIA control panel, or you can right click on your desktop to get there as well. And you will be greeted with this setting right here, or this page. And it's going to be on let the 3D application decide. By default, I would checkmark use 3D application settings immediately because I usually like to just change everything off the get-go. Again, most of these settings from my previous videos, I usually just set to off, everything to off, basically, and make sure that everything is just set to off. DSR factors off. Low latency mode. This one is kind of a mixed bag. I used to use low latency mode and I used to suggest to have it just on the on setting, but recently I found out that having it on actually negatively affected my input latency sometimes and actually made more frame drops when I had it on in Fortnite. So if you have it off, this actually makes it much smoother and much faster. So go ahead and turn that off. Maximum frame rate off. Monitor technology. Now this is going to say G-Sync compatible, but I'm not actually using a G-Sync. I have G-Sync disabled, but if you are using G-Sync, make sure this is on. This is very important to have on if you have G-Sync. So just let's keep going down through the settings here. Off on MFAA. Make sure that your GPU is selected as your OpenGL rendering GPU. Prefer maximum performance for desktop users. If you are on a gaming laptop, please keep your gaming laptop on optimal power. Do not change it off of optimal power. You will experience massive FPS drops and your clock speeds will drop as well as your temperatures go up. Because for some reason, excuse me, my voice is kind of a little bad because I am kind of sick. I don't have COVID though, so that's the thing. But what I noticed is that Nvidia, for some reason, didn't code in a failsafe, and they make it so that when you enable prefer maximum performance on a laptop, it does the same thing as a desktop. It doesn't idle the GPU at all. So your GPU will always be running at its maximum clock speed 24/7 on that laptop, and it will not be having a good time. So that's why I recommend keeping it on optimal power if you have a laptop. Again, preferred refresh rate. Make sure this is on highest available. I recommend having this on highest available because it ensures that the refresh rate is always the highest it possibly can be. Shader cache, which is something they just introduced in a few drivers back when Windows 11 first came out. I found that just leaving this on driver default doesn't really make a difference. All it does is it just caches more textures and stuff, so when you launch the game again later, it'll feel smoother, but it's kind of like a placebo smoother because more textures are loaded in from last time. Anisotropic filtering optimization, make sure this is set to on. Negative LED bias, make sure this is set to clamp, as this can make your shadows look a little jagged. And then texture filtering quality, make sure you have this set on high performance if you are on a desktop, and have this set to performance if you are on a laptop. Now, the reason why I say set this on performance is it gives a little bit of a lighter load on your GPU if you have it set to performance instead of high performance on your laptop. And we all know you laptop gamers out there suffer from massive temperature problems. I have been there. My laptop had the exact same issue, and it was solved by just changing a couple of these settings in the Nvidia control panel. Moving along to try linear optimization, make sure this is on. This is a big thing that should always be on. What it does, it just improves your frame rate. I don't know what it does. It does some kind of wizardy magic or something. Threaded optimization right here, you want to make sure that this is set to auto. Now, in previous past videos, I have said to have this on, but auto does just as good a job because it detects if your system does have multi-threading or if it doesn't or not. Most of you out there are probably running multi-threaded systems who watch my video like me, running either a Ryzen CPU or something higher end that has more cores, more threads, or even 4 cores, 8 threads. But basically, if you don't have a multi-threaded processor, just leave this on auto. If you don't know if you have a multi-threaded processor, just right-click on your taskbar here, click Task Manager. This is what you're going to see when you first launch it right here. Just click on More Details and hit the Performance tab. And then you're also going to be seeing this first. And then just right-click, hit Change Graph to Logical Processors, and you can see if you have multiple. If there's only a certain number of boxes here and they're the same numbers of cores as there are logical processors, then you most likely do not have a hyper-threaded CPU or a simultaneous multi-threaded AMD CPU, which I don't even know if those exist out there, but that's basically just a quick and brief explanation of that, and we're going to be moving on here. Off on triple buffering, off on vertical sync. Although I did find that use the 3D application setting worked better with G-Sync. So if you are using G-Sync, leave it on that just to see if it helps. If it doesn't, then just put it to off. Virtual pre-rendered frames, make sure pre-rendered frames is set on use the 3D application. I don't recommend changing it past use the 3D application, but since I'm a hardcore gamer, 1 has always worked for me, so I always leave it on 1, but I did notice there was no difference leaving it on use the 3D application setting. So you can technically just leave this on use the 3D application setting, but I think 1 does a better job in my personal opinion. And so we're just going to go ahead and move on. So moving on here, if you don't have physics, obviously if you didn't install physics, this doesn't really matter, but I still send it anyway to my GPU. And now we're going to move on to display scaling. If you are using G-Sync, you are missing out. So if you are using G-Sync, essentially what this is doing is it's forcing your GPU to be used on GPU rendering for your display. So your display is being rendered using the GPU, the resolution, basically everything is going to be rendered on the GPU instead of your display managing all the scaling and stuff like that. So if you want the lowest input latency possible, I recommend turning off G-Sync if you do not care about G-Sync, and then just setting this to no scaling on your main monitor. Click display scaling if you have the option. Most laptops don't, so just leave it on no scaling GPU if you're on a laptop. And then make sure all your other displays are set to aspect ratio, because if you set all the displays to no scaling, that's not a good time. I noticed that a lot of my applications would go off the screen or they wouldn't look quite right if I had them off. So I just leave it on aspect ratio, and that'll about do it for the Nvidia control panel. So we're going to go ahead and close out of the Nvidia control panel now, and we're going to enter the Nvidia profile inspector. So you're going to want to open this as administrator. And once you have opened this as administrator, we're going to look for Fortnite. Just search up Fortnite here. And some of the basic settings that you're going to want to change here are your frame limiter. You want to make sure that any of this, if you're using G-Sync, again, do not touch this. If you do want the lowest input latency possible, I recommend not using G-Sync. So here, frame limiter, we want to make sure this is on off. G-Sync application mode, we want to make sure that this is set to off. G-Sync requested state, we want to make sure this is set to disallow. Same thing for application state, make sure this is set to disallow. Global feature, make sure this is set to off. G-Sync mode, make sure this is set to off as well. Maximum pre-rendered frames, I, again, said to make sure that this was on use the 3D application setting, but I'm a diehard gamer who believes in that one single pre-rendered frame makes the difference. Preferred refresh rate, make sure this is still on highest available. Don't touch any of these settings down here. Vertical sync, make sure this is on force off. Again, if you're on G-Sync, play around with this, but I found that use the 3D application setting doesn't affect it. So you can just play around with that if you want. So we want anti-aliasing behaviors. We want to set this on none. We want to set gamma correction to be off. You don't want any gamma correction in Fortnite. Line gamma, we want to make sure this is set to disabled. Again, we are underneath the Fortnite profile and not the global profile because we want to specifically just tweak Fortnite. So we're going to go here, moving along. We want to make sure that all these are set to off. And then FXAA usage, I usually don't use FXAA, so I disable it. Now, those of you who do actually use FXAA or the Nvidia image scaler can play around with this setting, but I don't use FXAA, so generally I keep it disabled. But I did find that having it on allowed made zero difference, so you can have it on allowed if you want. Now, under texture filtering mode, make sure this is on off on user defined. Anisotropic filter settings, make sure this is set on off. Linear. Prevent oh man, that is such a tongue twister. Anisotropic filtering is set to on. You want to have no filtering. You want to have both the optimization settings on. Driver controlled LOD bias, make sure this is set to off. You don't want your LOD bias to be affected when you're in game. Basically what all this does is it just makes your lines and your edges look smoother on shadows and makes your shadows pop out. I know some people actually use shadows, so you can have this on if you want, but again, no difference. Negative LED bias, make sure this is on clamp. You don't want it to be doing anything. Again, if you're on a laptop, make sure this is on performance, but if you're on a desktop, keep this on high performance. Moving on, we're going to go down to ambient occlusion settings. Fortnite does not use ambient occlusion, especially when you're using competitive settings. So just go ahead and make sure that this is on off and make sure ambient occlusion usage is also set to disabled. And now the biggest setting that I found the most improvement from, especially in Fortnite with those FPS drops, is this. It's called the memory allocation policy. Now, for some reason, this is set to as needed. Now, what's funny about this is I looked into this setting and I actually asked Nvidia, or looked up rather on the forums, what this setting does. And all it does is it just makes the GPU communicate faster with the game. So frames get rendered faster. You can try aggressive, but pre-allocation seems to be the best sweet spot. It's like balanced mode, so you can leave it on there. Nvidia predefined arsenal usage. Disable this if you're not using GeForce Experience. If you are using GeForce Experience, keep this enabled, because otherwise you will not be able to use Shadowplay. As much as I hate Shadowplay, I know a lot of you out there are using Shadowplay, so keep this setting on if you want to use Shadowplay. Moving along, we're going to go down here to the bottom tab, and we're going to go to variable refresh rate, and we're just going to go ahead and set this to disable. Since we disabled G-Sync earlier, that's really not a problem, but If you are still using G-Sync, make sure this is set to enabled. If you are using G-Sync and this is disabled, you will not have G-Sync. G-Sync will not be active. So once we made all those changes, you can go ahead and hit apply changes. But there's one more change I want to make inside of the global profile. So if you go ahead and just scroll back all the way to the top to base profile, scroll down and head to the 5th tab here in the common tab. And this is really nice for some of you streamers out there who don't want to drop performance while gaming. It's called the CUDA 2 P state. Essentially what this does is it forces the clock speeds to drop in order to not sacrifice stream quality. Now, from what I've noticed, I've had MSI Afterburner on while gaming and streaming at the same time, and I noticed that a second I launched a game and I started streaming, that my clock speeds were going all over the place, man. They were clocking all over the place. They were fluctuating like nuts. And that was what was causing my frame drops while streaming. I found that having the setting disabled actually netted me more FPS, and Nvidia apparently made this setting to stop dropped frames and encoder overload settings in OBS, but I record in 1080p 60 FPS at a 20,000 bit rate, and I never noticed a single issue, and I was recording Fortnite for an hour at 400 FPS to 300 FPS. So obviously this setting does absolutely nothing. So go ahead and just disable it because you don't want this on if you're streaming. So now that we're done with the Nvidia settings, let's move on to the in-game settings. So once you've gone ahead and launched up Fortnite, what you're going to want to do once you're inside of Fortnite and you have your settings is just to go down here to the Fortnite settings. By the way, you can add me on Fortnite. I don't play Fortnite, but I need friends anyway. It's just Flameboy900. I use that for most of my in-game names. Go ahead and go to your settings and make sure that you are in performance mode. So go to performance mode and then just restart. Now you may be asking, why performance mode? Well, most of the pros are actually using performance mode right now. DirectX 12 and 11, they're not too great. They still have FPS drops. They're not the greatest. I would just recommend using performance mode as it has been tested and proven to give the highest amount of FPS with also the lowest FPS drops. So if you aren't using performance mode already, switch to performance mode, restart your game, and then once you've done that, go ahead and restart your game again, make sure that it is in performance mode, and then just quit your game. Just click exit, quit your game. Because once you're in performance mode, you're going to go to a special folder. So this folder is actually the folder where all the Fortnite data is. Okay, Epic, you can shut up. So what you want to do is go down to your search tab, or if you have your search tab hidden, just click the start menu, type %app data %, and then go to the app data folder. Click just app data, don't be in the roaming folder. Click local, and then find the Fortnite game folder, saved, config, Windows client, game user settings, right click on game user settings, uncheck read only if this is active, hit apply, and then right click on it again, open with, make sure that you choose Notepad or Notepad++ or an application that can change settings like this. So the first setting I'm going to be going over is actually Gamma. So Gamma, I recently found out, actually highly affects your FPS. If you're wondering how I got to this fine screen, by the way, you can go ahead and go to File or Edit here and click Find, or you can just hit Control F, go to Find. So we'll just search up Gamma right now. And by default, this is set to 2.2 or 2.5 or something like that. But I found that 1 is just like the best and most smoothest experience I got, with the most amount of fidelity and the most amount of brightness. Anything lower than 1 was way too dark, and also we lost a lot of fidelity. So 1 is a good general medium. That's a 1 dot and then 6 zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once you've changed Gamma, you can go ahead and click Control S or save, but keep note of the default values if you are having problems. So, and actually a setting that some pro players have been using now that I was not aware of, that I asked some pro players that they were using. I went into their streams, I asked them, and they were using a setting called show grass, and I had no idea that this was even in the Fortnite config until some pro players told me about it. And show grass, essentially, grass, believe it or not, I don't know what kind of idea Epic had when they were making Fortnite, but grass is a little too detailed. It actually takes a significant chunk of your FPS if you have grass on. But I noticed that disabling grass, just like the pros do, you just want to change this value from true to false, and then again hit Control S or go to File and hit Save. And now we'll move on and scroll down until you find the scalability groups. The scalability groups, set your render resolution, make sure this is set to 100. If you are already in performance mode, make sure that this is performance mode that you're changing and not DirectX 11 or DirectX 12, as these settings are meant specifically for performance mode. So change every setting in here or every variable from either a 1 or a 2 to 0. Change your texture quality to 1. Why I say 1 is because you want that little extra bit of rendering for the textures, because sometimes when you're in a battle and you're moving around quite quickly, the textures may not load in right away and you could get a severe FPS drop that could cause you a game. So I recommend just leaving this on 1 as it's medium. It's generally pretty okay looking textures and it doesn't affect your FPS that much. It affects just a little bit. Although what is important when you are using these settings, you must have BU's DirectX 12 in game set to false if this is not already at false, and you must have B prefer feature level 1 S3 whatever 31. You must set this to true, or otherwise performance mode will have issues. I figured out that this is actually a big fix that causes many FPS drops in game. If you change this from false to true, it will greatly improve your FPS drops. Now, the last setting I'm going to touch on is actually multi-threaded rendering. So it's been a general, well-known thing that multi-threaded rendering is a good thing if you have a multi-threaded system like mine. So I have plenty of threads here that the game can use, but for some reason, having this on false makes my mouse feel a crap ton faster. So I recommend, even if you are on a multi-threaded system, just leave this to false. Just turn it to false, just change it from true to false, and then leave it there. The last setting that I want to go over, I know I just said this was the last setting, but I just remembered it off the top of my head, is mouse acceleration. So we're going to look up mouse here, and B mouse acceleration equals true. We want to make sure that disable mouse acceleration is set to true. This doesn't matter. I did testing and it didn't feel different at all when I would use it, but the setting is there. It's a general good rule of thumb to just enable it, because if there's anything that disables mouse acceleration that is actually present within the game, enable it, because you do not want any mouse acceleration while playing any game, any high-paced FPS game. Mouse acceleration kills you, man. So once you're done here inside of the competitive settings and you have done all the config work, just again, right-click on the game user settings, hit properties, hit read-only, checkmark read-only, then hit apply. Then hit OK again, and then exit. So now that we've optimized every single Nvidia setting and every single in-game setting, we can move on to the network optimization. So the network optimization is probably the biggest problem that Fortnite has, and it has been prevalent ever since some of the seasons have started. People who even have good pings will have jumpy pings, and it's just actually because of Windows, believe it or not. So some of the new settings here that I recommend using, we're going to go here into Device Manager just to show you some of them. If you looked at my previous videos, please follow this new video, because these are the best and 100% effective settings for your Ethernet adapter. Just ignore my old video. It's old, it's outdated, it doesn't work for a lot of people anymore. Just use this. So I'm actually in display adapters. Sorry, I'm a bit tired. We want to move down to network adapters in the device manager. Find your network adapter. And for those of you who are using Wi-Fi, just go into your network adapter, hit properties, disable power management, and that's all you need to do for a Wi-Fi adapter. You don't need to change any of these Wi-Fi settings in here. None of them in the advanced settings. So if you go into here, you can click all these settings and do the following. So ARP offload, make sure this is set to disabled. Enable PME, make sure this is set to disabled. Energy efficient Ethernet, make sure this is set to disabled. Flow control, make sure this is set to disabled. Gigabit master slave mode, make sure this is set to auto detect. I've seen people do force master, but a general good rule of thumb, if you don't know what it means, just leave it on auto detect. Interrupt moderation rate. In the past, I would say to have this disabled, but recently I found out that having this enabled actually reduces system latency by a buttload metric ton. I don't understand what this magical setting is or what it does, but having interrupt moderation enabled and having the rate set at medium, in specific medium, made me have much faster mouse movement. I don't know why. Any checksum offload, every checksum offload, disable it. Jumble packet, if you have an on or off button here, change it to off if you have the older driver, which actually I should show you how to do that later. But moving along here, we have large send offload. Make sure this is off, disabled, disabled. Log linked administrative state. Now, I know some of you nosy Fortnite kids who are watching this video may have strict parents. If you're watching this video and you do have strict parents, you know exactly what this setting is. This setting allows you to change your IP address. Do not do this, because I did this as a kid and it got me in a lot of trouble. Just so you can have that little extra bit of Fortnite time, it really isn't worth it. Just let your parents do what they're supposed to and raise you right. That's not a direct insult, by the way. You're probably a very nice individual. I'm just saying that if your parents are restricting your internet in the first place, you probably shouldn't try and bypass it. I learned that the hard way. Moving along here, we have maximum number of RSS queues. Make sure this is set the highest number it can go. If you have modified this in the past, please leave this on the default number that comes with the driver. As I have noticed, I've gotten massive ping latency jumps if I have this number higher than what the driver can handle. NS offload, disabled. You don't want that enabled. Priority VLAN, make sure that that's disabled. PTP hardware stamp, make sure that's on disabled. Receive buffers. This is actually a huge setting. So if you are on a gigabit or higher connection, make sure that this is set to the maximum number value it can go to. So just hold this down, hold the up arrow down with your left mouse button and let it go to the highest it can go. It will make a huge difference if you're on a gigabit connection. Receive side scaling, this has to be on for interrupt moderation rate to work, so leave it on. Reduce speed on power down, make sure that this is set to disabled. Software timestamp, make sure this is set to disabled. Speed and duplex, make sure this is on auto. I know if you know what kind of cat you have or what kind of cat 6 cable you have or what kind of cable you have connected to your Ethernet, just leave this on auto. Let Windows do it. Again, any checksum offloads here, make sure they're disabled. Same thing with the transmit buffers as the receive buffers. If you're on a lower connection, leave it at default. If you're on a high-end connection like gigabit, make sure these are the maximum values that they can go. So UTP checksum offload disabled. Make sure every checksum offload is disabled. Wait for link. I found that keeping this on auto detect is fine. No ping jumps. Having it on or off doesn't make a difference, so you can leave that on auto detect. Wake on link settings. Make sure this is on disabled. Wake on magic packet. Make sure this is disabled. Wake on pattern match. Make sure this is disabled. And now we're done. But we're not done, because in my pack that I'm going to have in the description of all these tweaks that I'm doing in this video, you must update your driver, people. Do not use the stock included driver that comes with Windows. It is pure garbage. And how to do that is, you're going to want to go to my folder that you unzipped and you're just going to want to do the following. So in Device Manager, right here, where we are now, inside of this page right here in the driver tab on your network adapter, click Update Driver, browse my computer, go to C and where you extracted the folder and look for 26_8. These are the latest drivers for your device. These are every single Pro Ethernet adapter all in one driver pack. So all you have to do is just click here and then click 26.8 wherever you have it extracted, or 26_8, hit OK, and then click next, and it will say updating driver. Although just a fair warning, this will turn your internet off and I may be buffering right now, and you will also have to redo all these settings again because you just reset your driver to a new driver. If it does carry over, well, good for you, you got lucky, but sometimes it doesn't. And that about does it for this video. Thank you everybody who watched this video and appreciates my content. You are all amazing and I love every single one of you. If you like this video, leave a like. If someone else is having issues with Fortnite, go ahead and send this video to them. Anyway, I am back and I am ready to make more content in the year 2022. So thanks for watching and I hope you enjoy.